froze on the screen. It's an odd sensation when that happens. Hello, my beautiful people. It is lovely to see you all on this Thursday afternoon. Apologies, I am a few minutes late. I think I mentioned... Sorry, the dog is throwing the ball at my feet. He wants me to throw it for him. It won't go far into small study. I think I mentioned when I said that I would do today's Facebook Live at 5 o'clock that there was a chance I might be a little bit late. I've had the kids at the dentist getting their braces adjusted, and the dentist ran a little bit late for the first time in ages. So, apologies for the late start, but I'm not too far behind. Now, I thought this week I would talk about sleep, and that came up because a few people are talking about struggling to sleep at the moment, myself included. I think there's a few things going on in terms of it's December. People are starting to potentially get worried or stressed about Christmas. Sorting out family events can be challenging. Doing all your shopping is challenging, and everyone's just tired. It's the end of the year. It's been a long year. We obviously would like to be able to just sit back and relax and take a break, but that's not, for a lot of us, not happening just yet. Hopefully we get to Christmas and then beyond, and then we have that beautiful in between Christmas and New Year time where you just sit around and read books and do nothing, and snooze and rest and relax and catch up. But anyway, so all of that's going on. I did do a Facebook Live about sleep 3 months ago. It was back, I had a quick look. It was back in September. So if you scroll back through the videos in the page, you'd be able to find it. So in that one, I concentrated a bit more on what sleep deprivation does, in particular how it messes with your hormones. I'm just looking at my notes as to what I said last time. And I talked about the foods that might impact your sleep, and also what happens when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, why you're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And gave quite a few tips around how to manage or how to improve your sleep in terms of A, going to sleep, and B, staying asleep. So today I thought I'd take a slightly different perspective. Some of you may have seen that I'm doing a little mini training session on sleep and in what sleep is, why we need to sleep, and how we can improve our sleep. And so I'm coming from a slightly different perspective in terms of a little bit more of the technical detail around sleep. And a lot of what I talk about, sorry, that's going to slide over when I do that, is from this book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. It's a fascinating book. I'll be honest, I haven't read the whole thing. I dip in and out of it, and I do want to finish it during the break. But every time I read another section or look at another part of it, I learn something new. So it's a really fascinating read as to what's going on when we sleep. Now, I'm going to have to let this dog out in a minute because he's decided he wants to play. So, why do we need to sleep? Obviously, when we're babies, excuse me one second. My goodness, I don't think I've ever done. Oh, I haven't even got these back in. Goodness me. I apologise sincerely. I don't think I've ever left in the middle of a live before, but the dog was just being more and more annoying. Poor thing, he hasn't been out today because it's been such miserable weather. Anyway, where was I? Okay, so why do we sleep? When we're babies, obviously, we are sleeping so that we can grow. But as we get older and we're no longer growing, we are sleeping so that our cells can regenerate, so that our muscles can recover, so that our digestive function can work effectively, so that all our bodily systems can regenerate themselves and work effectively, and in particular so that our brains can create neurotransmitters. So we're creating neurotransmitters all the time, but sleep in particular is a time where our brains do an awful lot of work. So while the rest of us is resting and regenerating, our brain is super, super busy. Now, there are two main types of sleep, which I'm sure you've heard of. One is REM sleep and the other is non-REM sleep. REM stands for rapid eye movement, and that's generally the first-ish stage of sleep, so not long after you've gone to sleep. And you'll see this when you see babies fall asleep. If you're watching their eyelids, you see flickering underneath, so their eyes are moving constantly. And then NREM sleep is a deeper sleep. So you go into a deeper sleep, and there's actually 4 stages within that phase, named stage 1 to 4, and stage 3 and 4 in particular are what they call the really slow wave, so slow brainwave activity, super, super deep sleep. If someone tries to wake you when you are in one of those stages of sleep, it's really hard to wake you up. And we've all been there when at some point during the night, if a child calls us or there's a noise outside, there's some times where you just wake up like that. And then there are other times where it feels like you are literally wading through quicksand, trying to wake yourself up. And that is reflective of where you are in your sleep cycle during the night. Now, a couple of things about those 2 different sleep stages, so REM and non-REM. And I wanted to look in this little book to explain it to you. When you are a baby, you're having about roughly 50-50 between REM and non-REM sleep. And you're obviously sleeping a whole lot more than when you're an adult. By the time you get to being a sort of older teenager and beyond, you're getting roughly 80% non-REM sleep and 20% REM sleep. That's the breakdown during the night. But here's the other interesting piece. During the night, you cycle through roughly 90-minute cycles where you start. So when you first go to sleep, you'll go into REM, and then you'll go deeper into the NREM sleep and go through the 4 stages, potentially, of that. And then you'll be in the deepest one for a little while. Then you'll come back up and you'll gradually work your way back up. And then after roughly 90 minutes, you'll go back into, so you'll come back up to REM, then you'll go back down into the deeper ones and back up again, and so on. And that cycle continues as the night goes on. But what also happens is, as the night goes on, is the amount of time you spend in the deep sleep gets shorter, and you spend more time in the slightly lighter REM sleep. So you need both. They're both really, really important. But if you, for example, have to get up super early, more early than usual, say you've got to get to the airport for an early flight or something like that, so you may have set your alarm for 4 o'clock in the morning and you normally get up at 6, say, you're missing out on some of that REM sleep that you are normally used to and that you normally get. Going to bed earlier in the night doesn't make up for that, because your body still sticks with the routine that it normally follows. So you might think to yourself, well, I've got to get up super early in the morning, so therefore I'll just go to bed earlier at night and get the same amount of sleep. But you don't feel as good as you normally would despite having had X amount of hours of sleep. And the reason is you haven't gone through the right number of cycles with the right amount of REM and NREM, which I'm going to say is NRMA at some point, but NREM sleep as well. Now, the other thing that I find absolutely fascinating about this is during REM sleep, your brain is working on strengthening your neural connections, and it's often very creative as well. It's where your creative thought processes are flowing. During the NREM sleep, which you have more of in general, your brain's actually doing what they're calling weeding out the neural connections that it doesn't want. So we are always creating new neural connections because our brains are always firing off and there's always neurotransmitters and things going on. But there's a lot going on that we don't potentially need. So we go to sleep, our brain goes to work and says, let's get rid of the stuff that we don't need anymore. And in so doing, it then creates space so that we can create the memories that we need as well. And there's been a lot of study done on showing how sleep deprivation impacts memory as well, and how learning something and then going to sleep and getting some deep sleep can help cement those memories. How often do you wake up in the middle of the night and suddenly go, that's what I was trying to remember today? Or alternatively, you might be half awake and your brain's sort of pondering a problem and you can come up with a really good solution to it because your brain is more creative in the sleep stage that it's just been in. Unfortunately, it doesn't always translate that you remember that the next morning. I'm notorious for waking up and thinking I had a really good solution to my problem last night and it's gone by the time I've woken up. But anyway, I digress. So the other thing I wanted to talk about So I've talked about the cycle, the sleep and wake cycle that we go through during the night, and the two main types of sleep. I also wanted to mention the circadian rhythm and how that changes during our life stage as well. In particular, teenagers, their bodies are actually more primed to be wide awake at 9, 10 o'clock at night and to sleep later during the day. So around the time that us, their parents, are starting to wind down and head off to bed, they are actually wide awake. And lots of you know this because lots of you have teenagers who do this. It's not their fault, is all I'm saying. Their bodies are actually working better on that type of clock at this point in their lives. Unfortunately, school doesn't work in that way for them a lot of the time. That's why we get to the school holidays and all our teenage kids, we don't see them all day and we think they're sleeping the day away, but in fact they're just sleeping in line with their own circadian rhythms. So we need to cut them a little bit of slack when we can. Also remember that over time that circadian rhythm will actually shift back again and will end up being more in line with, well, obviously because we all get a little bit older, shifts back to, I guess, what you'd call more socially acceptable hours. But telling a teenager to go to bed at 10 o'clock when they're wide awake is like someone telling us to go to bed at 7 or 8 o'clock at night and we can't get to sleep because we're still wide awake, we're not ready to sleep yet. Same thing applies to teenagers a few hours later. Just know that they will eventually come back to the fold, so to speak. Other thing I wanted to talk about, I find everything fascinating that I read and learn. Night owls versus morning people. Roughly 30% of the population are night owls. Roughly 40% of the population are early birds, so get up, with the sun coming up, and work really well better in the morning. The night owls obviously work better later in the afternoon and into the evening. And if you try and force a dedicated night owl or a dedicated early bird to switch around, it doesn't work because that's the way they're wired. The other 30% of the people fall somewhere in between, generally tending more towards, I can't remember now whether it was more towards the morning or the night, more towards the morning I think. It's sort of, a lot of it is actually genetic as well. If you have two parents who are both night owls, chances are you will be a night owl. And vice versa, obviously. If your parents are morning people, chances are you are more likely to be a morning person. So telling someone who's a night owl, we'll just go to bed earlier and you'll be able to get up earlier, it doesn't work because that's not the way their body's time clock works. There's no right or wrong, there's only obviously what works for you. But if you're a night owl, then try and plan your day to work within that and to get your best working times later in the day when you know you're more awake, versus if you are obviously a morning person, then you try and plan your day around that. The only other thing I wanted to talk about today, because I'm aware I've been going for quite some time and it's all been quite technical, is what to do when you wake at 3 o'clock in the morning. I did touch on this during my last, so the September Facebook Live when I talked about sleep. And all the standard rules in terms of, rule isn't the right word, but all the standard tips in terms of how to get back to sleep are worth trying. So that's deep breathing, it's reading a book for 10 minutes, it's potentially getting up and getting a quick drink of water or going to the bathroom if you've woken up from a bad dream and you need to distract yourself, for example. It might be popping some earphones in and listening to a meditation app, whatever works for you. So the normal things that help you go to sleep at night will also quite often help you get back to sleep. But there's an interesting one I learned recently, which was if you find that you're awake in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you cannot get back to sleep, and we know how frustrating that can be when you can't get back to sleep, instead of trying to focus on going back to sleep, try to actually focus on keeping yourself awake. So try really hard to keep your eyes open. And you might find that in the process of trying to keep yourself awake, you actually fall back to sleep. Now, I was awake at roughly 3 o'clock this morning. I wasn't super awake, so whether this was a really good experiment for me or not, I don't know. But it popped into my mind, this new technique, so I thought I'll give it a go, and I tried really hard to keep my eyes open. And I swear I was asleep within about 2 minutes. Now, as I said, I wasn't properly awake, so it wasn't one of those moments of, oh my goodness, I can't get back to sleep. But it was a little bit of a play. So give it a try. Next time you happen to wake at 3 in the morning and you're really struggling to get back to sleep, force your eyes open and keep them open as much as you can and see if that works to help you drop back off to sleep. Something different. Okay, that is 15 minutes worth of me talking about sleep. It's making me a bit tired. I think that I will leave you to it. Go back and watch my earlier September sleep Facebook Live for more specific tips on how to improve your sleep, how to improve or what sort of foods will impact your sleep. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I am doing a little training session which I'll record and can send out to anybody who's interested. So if you haven't already commented on my post about that saying yes please send it to me, then comment on this one saying yes please send it to me. I still have to record it. I'm just finishing putting the final touches on it. It'll just be a 15-minute or so, here's what sleep's all about, a bit more detail of what I've talked about, but also a bit more detail about types of foods to help sleep and what happens if we don't get enough sleep as well, because the health implications are fairly significant. So that's all for now. Have a brilliant rest of the day. Enjoy the weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all again on next week's Think About Thursday. Take care. Bye.